All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Sober Yoga Girl. This is actually episode 100 of the show, which is kind of cool. And it is a super special episode because I have some very special guests on the show with me today. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about the original Sober Curious Yoga, which is actually called Sober Girls Yoga. And the reason why we're getting the group together is because Sober Girls Yoga is having a revival, which the news is probably out by the time you are listening to this episode. But Sober Girls Yoga is the original program that we had for yoga and sobriety on the Mindful Life practice. And what made it different than Sober Curious Yoga was that it was a space specifically for women, people who identify as women, people who feel comfortable in women's only spaces to gather. And the reason why we shifted to Sober Curious Yoga was to make it a bit more inclusive. And now we've decided to keep both. So have an inclusive, open-ended one, and then also a women's only space. And so really excited to bring it back. And I have three of the original, the OGs from Sober Girls Yoga. So they joined us in the very first month of Sober Girls Yoga, which was July 2020. So I have Amber and Tasha with me, who did the first 30-day challenge, and Leigh, who joined us, I think, just after that as part of our Sober Girls Club that used to meet every Sunday. And so all three of them have remained members of the Mindful Life practice and have evolved on their journey. And now we're all getting back together to hang out and do the show. So welcome, guys. Thanks for being here.
Yay!
So how about before we start us off, I was wondering if each person could maybe introduce themselves, say where they are in the world, and how long they have been alcohol-free for.
I'll go ahead and start. Hello all, Amber here, coming in from Bahrain. I have been sober for, I believe my app tells me I am just under 2 years, so I'm 662 days.
Wow.
So super exciting and happy to be here. Thanks, Alex, for bringing us back. Yay to our group.
Okay, I can go. Hi, everyone. My name is Tasha. I'm actually currently in Palm Springs, but I've been with the Mindful Life practice kind of around the world since I've been with you all. So I did Alex's 30-day sober yoga challenge in July 2020. And that's really kind of like been my start when I started my non-drinking journey. And yeah, I've done Sober Curious Yoga teacher training. I don't know what you're calling it. A few different things with MLPC. So it's definitely been a huge life changer for me.
And I'm Leigh. I am in Philadelphia, which is Lenai Lenape land. Started with the MLPC. I was living in Cincinnati at the time, and I was about probably 90 days sober when I started. April, May, maybe 120 days sober when I started with the MLPC. I have 764 days. I always have to check now. My sober date, I consider to be March 1st, 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic. And I have been with the MLPC doing yoga classes and also the Sober Curious Yoga YTT training. And then also I did the 200-hour yoga teacher training with Alex. And now I'm in the 300-hour. And I teach a variety of classes with the MLPC. I love it. And I love doing yoga on Zoom. It's really nice. It's been great to be able to practice at home and connect with other people all around the world. So it's been awesome.
Wow, how amazing is that to think of like how far we've all come and the journey has evolved and changed since 2 years ago, you know? It's pretty cool. I was chuckling to myself because Amber and Tasha, the way you guys both picked up the talking stick, like I was like, I feel like it's how you pick up the talking stick every single time we're on a call.
I know, like, I tried to push it off for you, and I was like, people. She pushed it back. I always wait.
I love that.
It's like the awkward wait time that's happening.
Love it. So I know we kind of shared a little bit about, in that kind of prompt, people shared a little bit about their journeys. Does anyone else want to share anything else about kind of like their sober journey or their sober evolution? Or
Yeah, I'll giddy up on that. I've been thinking about this today.
I'm going to bring that phrase into my lexicon. Continue, sorry.
I started on June 4th. So when I came into Sober Girls Yoga, I was also about 30 days. And mine started was because I got super sick, and my doctor told me that with the prescriptions that I have to take every week, he said, you can go ahead and drink, but you can only have 2 drinks per week. And I knew myself well enough that that was not ever going to happen. That if I was to go out for a night, there's no possible way that I could just keep it to 2. I would rationalize that, next week I just won't have 2. So then I can have 4 today, and it would just become the cycle of abuse of my body. And so that's when I was like, okay, I can't, I've been trying to come up with an excuse for many years, off and on, trying to determine like, how do I moderate my drinking? And moderation was really difficult for me. It was a major challenge. I would find myself at bars moderating by having a glass of water between every drink. But then I would be there having that glass of water, drinking it down as fast as I could so that I could have my next drink. And looking around at other people and gauging how drunk are they? How drunk am I? Where am I at in my journey tonight? How do I slow down? How do I speed up? And it was overwhelming for my mind. And the next day I would have really bad anxiety where I would kind of be really hard on myself about things that I said or the way that I behaved. And I would find myself texting people asking hey, what happened? Or hey, I'm really sorry for what I said. And it just became a real terrible experience. And so when this illness took over, it was almost like it was for a reason. The universe just opened and was like, here's what you got to do now. And here's what your decision is going to be about. So it was that decision to just stop. And I initially was like, I'm just going to do 90 days and see how I feel. And then my mom had mentioned, she's like, why not just go for 100? And I was like, yeah, I could probably do that. So before I knew it, I was several months and feeling really good. And then that was when I was living in South Dakota. And then I had gotten the job here in Bahrain. And so I entered Bahrain, 2020, August 2020. So still full in COVID, and was like, I'm going to start fresh in a country where I only know a few people from my previous time I lived here, and I am going to start as a non-drinker, and that's how I'm going to enter, and that's what I'm going to do. And it's taken my life to new places where I can actually deal with my issues and my shit without using alcohol as a crutch to shield me or to armor me. And I actually have to feel what I'm feeling and talk about it and no longer push it away, because the truth always comes out, and all these feelings and things that I had been holding back for so long, they finally revealed themselves, and it took me to new places in my relationships with my friends, with my family. It's definitely taken me to experience life from more holistic perspective. And that's where I'm currently at, just dealing with all those little intricacies of life. And it feels really good. Some days I want to, like after a hard day, I'm like, this would be like the best time to just go to the bar. But it's honestly just a fleeting moment, thought, and then I'm back to where I need to be. So that's my little spiel.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. And congrats on almost being at 2 years. That's incredible. It's huge.
I was thinking about this today too, because I think I grew up thinking that drinking was pretty normal, that it was normal to get drunk, nurse a hangover the next day, and move on and get drunk again. Like that was just normal, that red wine was good for me. It had those antioxidants. It had that, I don't know how you pronounce it, like resveratrol or something, but that we're supposed to be able to drink moderately and be able to participate with alcohol with ease as part of our lifestyle. And that was healthy and a way like a normal lifestyle. And I was in like a running group, and we would all like fixate on being healthy and being able to run fast. And then after running, we would all go to the bar and drink a lot of beer, wine, whatever. We would do marathons, and it was really normal to do the marathon. And then after the marathon, hit the beer tent right away, drink as much as we can, focus really a lot on our health and wellness and fitness levels. And then at the same time, drink a lot. And there was like this dichotomy for me, like we're doing this one thing that's really healthy and then drinking, but I thought that was just normal and that's what we're supposed to be able to do. And it wasn't even like questioned for me that there was an issue either. And I always thought like either you're a normal drinker and can drink normally, or you're an alcoholic. And I would question myself, but I was always like, oh, I'm not an alcoholic, so I'm not over there. So it's okay if I'm a normal drinker and getting hangovers and drinking a lot. And I never really even thought about that alcohol is a poison and we're all drinking this poison and it's not really healthy. And I think, I have said this before, but my sister sent me a book, The Sober Curious. I can't remember I think it's just called Sober Curious by Ruby Warrington. And that made me think a little bit, but I was like, oh, I don't really want to stop. And then, my son stopped drinking and I listened to a podcast and I was like, oh, this really resonates with me. Like this is the one thing, like I'm doing all these things in the health industry and wellness, working on my, eating well. I was, eating plant-based, doing all this exercise, and yet I was still drinking. It was like the one thing that I really hadn't addressed in my life. And I thought it was normal that I was drinking. And then I flipped a switch for me that I needed to stop. I don't know. What was the question? How did we get here? Was that it? I don't know. I'm going on about other things, but I just think it's like a weird dichotomy that like we're all focused in our society about health and wellness, and then we ignore the whole thing about alcohol, and that just is like we don't want to even address it as an issue. And that was definitely true for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Tasha, tell us a bit about your journey.
I feel like my story is a little bit different in that like I was not seeking to become sober, or like didn't really have like, Amber has the medical thing and Leigh had kind of like a realization. I stumbled into the yoga program because like I was just doing kind of like a monthly cleanse anyways. And I was like, oh, this will be a nice way to like do yoga and have a little bit of accountability for like just like taking like a little summer recharge. But then I guess the more I like, just kind of as I started building the habit of not drinking, and it was also pandemic and I was living with my parents over the summer, who my mom's an organ donor recipient. So I was being extra careful. So like really isolated. So like having this community where I was like, you know, collaborating with people and then just building the habit of not drinking, it all of a sudden like kind of I realized how much like I liked it, and then it kind of shifted for me to be about a thing of building relationships. And so that like since I stopped drinking, like I've made so many new friendships and relationships that have all been built without alcohol. And that's kind of where I think like me not drinking, like that's where my importance lies. Like I'd realized that like I just hadn't built relationships in that way before. So I guess like I don't think I've ever described myself as sober to people. Like I don't tell people that, or I don't really like track my date in that way, but just kind of like changing my like narrative in my head of like I don't drink, and like telling like I'll tell people like I don't drink, but I think it just like feels like less of a like once I let it go, it was kind of easy to keep it going because I had like filled my life with these other things like a strong yoga practice and just like relationships and all this stuff. So then once I let it go, like it's kind of nice to, it's like just distant enough, I guess. Yeah. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but yeah, I'm not sure anything else to add at the moment.
Thanks for sharing. And I love how everyone's story is a little bit different of how they stumbled into the practice. And I think that's important because it shows that it's not all one size fits all, or, you know, everyone has a different journey and a different way that they end up where they are. As you guys are talking, I was feeling, I know this is like a little bit different because we're recording a podcast, which like tons of people are going to listen to. But as I was talking to you guys, I was just reflecting on how much I miss Sober Girls Yoga. And I don't think I realized that. And Sober Curious Yoga is amazing. I was having this conversation with someone the other day who was a bit confused about why I was bringing it back and what the difference was. And I said, you know, it's amazing to have these inclusive spaces, but there's something special about being in a women's only space where I feel like I can comfortably be myself and share kind of everything that's going on with me and just feel really safe. And I was wondering if you all could share, what is your opinion? Why do you think there's a need for women-centered spaces in the sober world? Or is there a need? What's the difference?
I think I can't recall which book it is. We read a few books in the book club, but one of them really talked about how like AA was very male. I think originally it was only for males perhaps, or and then the whole program's written by men, and you know, people will kind of critique it for that patriot. I'm not strong with my words always. But I think that's something that really turned me, as I said, like for my own personal journey, like I wasn't seeking to get sober. Like I would have never found myself in an AA meeting or like something like that. But I think it's also a big piece of that. The way that the Sober Girls Yoga is structured is very like, it's kind of like being at brunch with friends, which is like cliche, but like a woman's like hobby, I don't know. And it wasn't rules based. And I never felt like, you know, I had to like do this and be kind of like a subordinate to anyone. Like everyone was coming together at the same level, at the same place. And it just like made it so that it was building friendships rather than like fitting into some sort of power structure, which I think like really, as a woman, like was something that I was really resistant towards.
Yeah, those are really, really good points. And that was one thing about the recovery program I was part of, which it's not officially a recovery program, but 1 Year No Beer, which I love because it got me to where I am today and love it. But it was run by two men and everyone was like running a marathon. And like the funny thing about it was that I ended up literally signing up for a 10K, and I then had to leave Rolf Gates. Like I was on Rolf Gates training. I was 100 days sober. He said to me, why don't you stay and be my assistant at this weekend vinyasa retreat? I'm like, I can't. I have to go like run this 10K that like I don't want to do, that everyone says that like you should be doing at the end of your, 100 days sober. And that's not to say, I'm sure for everyone it worked and that's why they had it as part of the program, but that was not who I was as a person. And so that was why for me, like having a more spiritual competition, or not even a competition, a more spiritual practice in your recovery really resonated more with me. And I think it resonated with a lot of, still in Sober Curious Yoga, we're probably 95% women anyway. But it just seemed to resonate with a lot of women as well.
I also feel that being women, like we'd obviously talk about the drinking, but we talk in frames of like dating or things that like, felt comfortable sharing with other women. Like,
True.
I went on like my first date sober, which I wouldn't bring that up in a shared space probably.
It's very true.
I think for me, it was, like post Me Too is when my like personal feminist journey really got going. I had always been like seeking a feminist understanding and breaking the patriarchy throughout my early 20s. And then, post Me Too, I feel like it became very obvious that women needed more spaces that were dedicated for them, by them, holding each other up, because we come from this patriarchal view that, it's men and then it is all competition between women. And you're not as good as that other person because there's always somebody better. And so having a space that allowed for all women to come together where there is really no rules. The rules are be nice and be compassionate and work on your empathy. And that is the space that Sober Girls Yoga provided, where we could talk about our own issues and what we were trying to sort through while dealing with the influence of the alcohol industry constantly in our faces, making us feel ashamed because we cannot control our alcohol intake, or we get drunk and we're supposed to be able to have some sort of control. All of this, like what feminist theory really looks at is that control factor. And that's what alcohol is constantly telling us, what we have to do in order to be better and to be bigger, and we have to compete. And it's dog eat dog world. And that's not how we should be living our lives, and that we should be uplifting one another and connecting and creating community. And I think that's what I enjoyed most, was to be able to bring my raw being, and others were able to be vulnerable and raw with me as well. So,
and I think too, just the structure of starting with a check-in, like everyone just has an opportunity to talk. And that's something that, in a bigger space, or like, mixed space where you maybe don't feel as comfortable, like I feel like that just like always opened the door for, and like there's sometimes people I know like wouldn't share, and that's fine also. But just having like that neutral starting point, I think was like very empowering.
Yeah, and also it was a routine, so you knew what was expected. So you didn't really have that angst and anxiety that you may have in a very loosey-goosey type situation. Dropping all sorts of word bombs.
Super interesting to hear, though. It's really interesting to hear your reflections on like moves that I thought I was making to open it up actually didn't work as well, but that's cool. Leigh, you were going to say something. What were you going to say?
I just was going to say that for me, it was just like, it felt like a safe space where I was able to share openly without being, I think that Tasha and Amber really hit on it, but that equal playing field where it's like a circle and everyone's on an even level to come in and share. And it was also small enough and intimate enough of a group that we really got to know each other. And I really looked forward to it each week. It was like getting together with my girlfriends. Yeah, just that safety in the holding space is really a nice thing and a non-judgmental, without getting advice, just being able to share freely with friends.
Yeah.
I was going to say, yeah, it's like things that I've like carried into like conversations with girlfriends also, like the rules that we set in the circle. I'm like, oh, like the like non-advice giving and stuff, like, you know, it's kind of helped me like within my female relationships also, of like building that structure of like communal, like just open sharing, I guess, compared to like complaining or other, you know. Like,
yeah, really, I feel like the structure of it, and I think we learned a lot of these things in the Super Curious Yoga teacher training about the ways to get people to open up, like being curious instead of coming in with advice, just asking why, what's going on with that? Can you explain it more in it? And I've taken it into other relationships too, and how I relate to other people. And I feel like it is really helpful, because when you come in like just trying to tell people what you think is true, you don't really know what is true for them. And you're not going to change people's minds that way, right? Like, I think this, that, and the other thing. And then they're like, no, I don't think so. So just asking, like, why do you feel this way? What's going on? I think it really helps a lot with relating with other people.
Absolutely. Amber, you mentioned a little bit about the idea of alcohol being a feminist issue. Does anyone want to touch more on that?
You know, before I started looking at alcohol as a feminist issue, I was very much on diet culture as a feminist issue, because my thoughts is that diet culture industry and the alcohol industry, they work hand in hand. And what they're doing is they're supplying women with these mixed messages and ideas about how they should live their life. And it's essentially, well, first of all, like the majority of the money that we pay to the diet culture and to alcohol is lining the pockets of old white men. So pretty much right there, it's like they have their thumb on us or their foot on our heads, holding us down, because the more that they can keep us drunk, hungry, deprived, living in a state of shame, the longer they have the power and the control. And so alcohol is a feminist issue, because when women stop drinking and start leading life that is a sober life, they become empowered, they're less stressed, they're more mentally cognizant and able to navigate the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows of life from a healthy standpoint. All the while uplifting and holding other people, men and women, and non-gender binary, however you present yourself, we are able to hold everybody up and empower one another. But when we're drunk and hungry, we have nothing. We have nothing but shame, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. We're an unhealthy batch. So I am all for us starting to shift the narrative that feminism, alcohol is a feminist issue. So Tasha, over to you. What you got?
I'm going to take it another way.
Ooh, I like it.
For me, it's just also a huge issue of safety and security, and not in a way at all of victim blaming. Like, no one deserves to be like, regardless of how drunk you are, like no one deserves to be, you know, in any sort of risky, dangerous situation. After I stopped drinking, I just realized, like, you know, bad situations that I've been in, like because I've been out late or because I've like, you know, I know me and Alex have shared so many stories of like night cab rides or things like where it just was not a good situation. And when your judgment is impaired and you're already in a situation where you're vulnerable because of your place in society, you know, I think it's just used as a tool, and you see it like just so normalized in like teenage TV shows and things where like it's just like I grew up like thinking that was like totally fine and normal and acceptable of like, you know, there to be like the drunk girls at parties that get like taken advantage of and whatever. And in no way am I like, all women shouldn't drink because that would eliminate that. Like, I don't think that that's the solution, but just in my own like reflection, once I stepped away from the drinking, like I got very heartbroken for like all of the past situations that I had been in. And just because like I was so down to like let go of all control of my life by drinking, and like by being like in a place where like I wasn't, you know, like I was like drinking to have fun, but it was like really like drinking to not be like so held back by like my thoughts and whatever. Whereas when I did let that go, and then I had kind of like built up my own like resources within myself to like where I wanted to be in control of situations, like I just realized like how that had like made me think it was okay to be treated certain ways. And, you know, that's just something that is, particularly a woman's issue because of the social structure, and that like being, I'm like talking with my hands and it's a podcast, but being like lower on the ring, and then it just allows people that have more power than you to like take advantage of that.
Absolutely.
And also, I mean, and how we're able to show up for other people, like, you know, if I'm out now, like my red flags are like flying everywhere when I see things that are dangerous, and I can like look out for my friends. Whereas like, you know, if I'm like out, like me and my friends are both trash, like I'm not showing up for them either.
Yeah. I'll never forget one night of my life. So I used to work for the walk home program at university way back in the day. And so I would actually be sober at night around when I was not partying. And I would always have a buddy. It was like me and a man. And we would be walking around. It was really fun. We had a walkie-talkie. Anyway, one night we were walking. I mean, we saw a lot of unsafe things, but there was one night I'll never forget this, seeing a young girl who was clearly a first-year student, had no shoes, no phone, no keys, with an older guy who was like carrying her home. And I intervened. I was like, we're taking her home. No, we're walk home. Goodbye. And like, we walked her all the way back to rest. She was a first year student. And I remember that so clearly. And that is like the perfect example of what you can do as a sober person. And I don't even think I put two and two together of like, I did this because I was sober, you know? But I think back on that, and that's exactly what I'm like. My red flags are up. I mean, I don't really go out at social scenes at all, but my red flags are up in nighttime environments, and I'm way more aware of what's going on. And I feel like I can have more, if something like that were to happen again, I feel like I would be able to be in that action mode that I was able to be in that night.
Yeah. Alcohol is like the number one date rape drug, right? It allows us to be so much more vulnerable, and it's not even like recognized as an issue so much. Like the typical feminist issues are like women's rights, NRA, diversity, you know, all these different things, LGBTQIA, all those things were started. But I think that like the Women's March it's not even something that is brought up like as an issue with the feminist movement. I think it's been recognized. Maybe it's starting to now, but hasn't been something that's, do you want to say something, Tasha?
No, I just want you to keep talking, and then I want to add on.
Oh, I just think, you know, it's like we have all these issues that we're fighting for with women's rights and reproductive issues, but it's like alcohol is not even something that is brought up. And yet it's what causes us a lot of the anxiety and issues that we have. And it's like hidden somehow because of, I think, what Amber was talking about, like the big alcohol, the money. It's all not even recognized as
capitalism.
Yeah, capitalism.
Like kind of tie that to Amber's point as well of like, and it was like a marketing tool to like empower women to drink, like, oh, this is like a revolution. And like, you know, I feel like, or like, oh, like I can be like a feminist and like, you know, like not like play like a man, like that's not really the term I want to be, but like, you know, it was like kind of like, it was marketed in that way. And we kind of, I think like a lot of feminists or people that like, you know, do like want to fight for that cause will like, you know, take that power because it's like, yeah, we want to be able to do whatever we want. And I think that is like, it was a very like intentional marketing tool.
Absolutely. I was reading something about that the other day. I was reading an opinion article in the New York Times that was talking about how women will pay like, I think it was something like, it was either 30% or maybe 13%. I think it was women are paying more for alcohol that's branded to be female, like pink vodka or Jane Walker. And they've made this whole market now. I never got into that stuff myself. I think I saw through it. Like, I was like, that one's cheaper. Or maybe it wasn't really on the market so much. Like, it definitely did not make its way to the Middle East in my drinking days. Maybe that's why I never got into it. But I know that that's a huge thing in the industry in North America, is making alcohol specifically targeted towards women.
Well, and it's also interesting, like organic and like wellness marketed alcohol, which also ties into the sober yoga thing.
Absolutely.
It drives me crazy. You know, and I was reading about like, so before Prohibition, women were the reason that Prohibition occurred in the States, because the men were pissing away all the family income. And so then they got rid of alcohol, but then the flappers of the 20s kind of brought it back because they were able to have cocktails and smoke, and it was like seen as an act of rebellion. So it's a very dicey history that women's rights and alcohol have. And so I think going forward with the reclaiming what is ours and what we want is, and I think that like it's a slow movement, but I know that it is shifting, and there's a lot more. I think celebrities are very helpful with this because they are pushing for people to start talking about it, and it's becoming destigmatized that just because you stop drinking doesn't mean you're an alcoholic. It doesn't mean that you hit rock bottom. It was just that was what made the most sense to you in your life, and we need to stop the judgment and like calling people and questioning why they stopped drinking, and just it's none of your business.
Yeah. You know? My favorite thing is like when like the first time I was like dating without drinking, like people would be like, oh, well, like what can we do? Like I would normally take people to the bar, to the brew. I'm like, there's literally so many things to do that like people were so like confused, like what can they do with me? Like, oh, like I don't know, like I don't know, like it was kind of mind blowing.
That actually just happened to me last week. So a guy who is interested, he said, he's like, oh, you know, like if I would have known that you were single, I would have asked you out earlier. And I was like, well, here I am. And he's like, all right. Well, let's, you want to go grab a drink or something? I said, I don't drink. And he said, oh, so what do you do? And I said,
what do you do if you don't drink?
I have friends. I really enjoy breakfast. And he just kind of looked, he's like, so maybe we can discuss what to do. And I was like, yeah, maybe. And I had to come home and think about it. I was like, what the hell do I do? Like, what are my interests? It's like, I suddenly like, I was just dumbfounded, like, oh, I don't drink.
But it's so true. Oh my goodness. It's, and that's interesting too, because it feels to me that the further I get away from drinking, that feels like a feminist issue too, is like that every date has to involve getting you drunk. Right. And I think about that a lot. And I think I carried on relationships for a very long time past they should have gone, because then when I was drunk, I was like, oh, he's not so bad. You know, and so it's really interesting that that's our story.
Perceptions. Yeah, I totally remember going to visit my daughter in Boston, and we would go from like one place to drink to another place, like from one brewery to another, and then to eat and order wine, and then to another bar at night. And I said to her, what would we do if we weren't drinking? Like, we had really nothing to, and that's what I thought that there was fun to do, was go from one place to another to drink, instead of coming up with ideas like going to an art museum, going for a walk in the park, going to I don't know, a painting class. There are so many other things we could have been doing, but was my idea of fun, was going to places to drink and sit in lovely spots. But the other thing I was going to say about the money in alcohol is I think it's really exciting now how much there is I think there is a growing awareness, and there's an industry now for non-alcoholic beverages and non-alcoholic beers. And there's so many different craft type brewing places that are coming out with NA beers that are really pretty good. And I think it's like an expanding, and it's really exciting to go to restaurants and have so many options here and there. Some restaurants, not all of them, obviously, but some restaurants with mocktails with NA beer options that are pretty good. So I feel like there is a growing awareness and a growing industry for capitalism, I guess.
Yeah. I'm just the sparkling water queen. Just one other thing I've been thinking a lot about is that I think it's such a desperation for connection and community that I think really fuels the alcohol industry. And I think particularly in a place like America where it's so individualistic and people, are really I grew up in the suburbs. So it's just like you are not you're just not intertwined with people in that same way that I see other cultural groups or from other places that I've lived in the world. So I think it just really fuels, because when you drink alcohol, you lower your affective filter and then you get this false sense of vulnerability. And I think that's what so many people crave, is to be vulnerable with people. So then people just kind of it feeds into this cycle of always drinking in order to be vulnerable. And then you realize when you wake up, you actually don't know these people. So then you have to continue that same path. And that was my biggest shift when I stopped drinking, was that I can realize really quickly, is this someone a friend or partner that comfortable with sober? And if it's not, because I haven't built a relationship yet and it needs time to build, or because I don't like this person, then there shouldn't alcohol shouldn't be the reason that I'm continuing. It's kind of what Alex was just saying of sticking with someone because you're drinking, but also kind of the reverse of that. And I think that is part of that, going back to the capitalism and the money, it's so marketed as a communal thing for so many people that feel so disconnected. And that's why, AA and other sober groups, I think, really do get such a following, because it fills that space that people are using alcohol to.
The other thing, you guys are talking a lot about dating, and I found I'm a little bit in a different place in life because I have gone through raising children with alcohol. And that is a huge thing that happens, is all the marketing that goes into, you need alcohol to raise children, basically. You can't, it's too hard of a job to do it without alcohol. And how can you get through a day without alcohol? And bringing alcohol to, putting it in the sippy cup, putting it in the cooler to bring to the soccer games, bringing it to, I don't know, all the different things that you drink, sitting, watching your kids play and drinking on the street with it's to me, I thought that I needed alcohol to raise my children, which is really a sad thing. I feel regret about that I didn't have quality time being able to play with my kids, because I was always trying to find ways to drink with my friends while I was with my kids. But it's something that's totally marketed, and wine mom, hashtag, all these different things. They put wine on onesies for kids. They put wine, all the drinking things that they put in cards on, the little jokes about drinking moms and how you need drink to get through. And the reality is it really it creates more anxiety in parenting and makes parenting more difficult. I mean, I remember being hungover and waking up. My kids, the babies, would wake up in the morning early, and it's so hard to be a good parent hungover. But
so I'm wondering, I have two more questions for you guys. So I wanted to ask you about what were some of your pop culture influences that you think influenced your perception around alcohol? But I also want to ask you then, who are your favorite sober pop culture influences now? And the reason why that came to my head was because I was a huge Sex and the City fan. Not at the time that it came out. I was a bit too young for that, but I watched it later in life in my 20s. And I think that shaped a lot of my perception around like drinking with friends. And I'm also really obsessed with the Sex and the City revival, where they have like a sober narrative of one of the main characters is going on a sober journey. And so anyway, I think that's interesting to think about, like, what were the influences shaped you back then, and what are the influences that are shaping you now?
Alex, I laugh because I watched Sex and the City when it came out, and I'm younger than you. So like, I would be watching at my grandma's house. She'd be like, close your eyes, like straight up from HBO. Anyway, I have always been a huge TV person. Like, I loved the teen dramas. So like, I was growing up, Gossip Girl was out when I was in middle school. Like, I loved One Tree Hill, like any CW teen drama, Veronica Mars, like they're always partying. And they're like also like, 25-year-old people playing teenagers. So they just like look like, and it just like makes sense. Like, you see people partying. That's just like, I remember going to high school being like, okay, like where are the parties? Like ready for it to be that scene. And then like the reality of those parties was definitely like totally different. But also I wasn't growing up in like the Upper East Side or Laguna Beach. But let me think about I'm not like as big into like, I don't follow people as much. So I can't try to think who I would think of as like who I like now, but maybe someone else will spark
My favorite celebrities now are Glennon Doyle and Abby Wambach that are sober. And
oh my goodness, I was in a Facebook group the other day. Sorry, I interrupted you, but someone posted saying, I recommend this person called Glennon Doyle. And people were saying, I've never heard. And I literally was audibly gasping. Like, how have you never heard of Glennon Doyle? How is that possible? And then someone else had never heard of Brene Brown. Someone was like, and I was reading these comments being like, oh my God. But of course, I probably hadn't heard of them before I started my sober journey either. But now I feel that they're so integral names to like my life. So those are, great example. Glennon Doyle and Abby. What's Abby's last name?
Wambach.
Abby Wambach. Yeah, great examples.
Yeah, the only thing that comes to my mind, like from when I was younger, is Animal House and like the college drinking scene. And that dates me, but I remember like all those movies that are just like drunken people, all weekend getting crazy. Those kind of movies.
Yeah, I grew up watching Dazed and Confused, and I'm also from small town Nebraska, so like that was my entire high school experience, was going out into the middle of fields or country roads and just like guzzling booze, like mixing vodka and Mountain Dew. I mean, what? And it was warm. Or like warm beers.
Amber, do you remember when you came to my house and I offered you a warm beer and you were like disgusted? Do you remember that?
No, it's warm. Oh, I can't do it.
Honestly, like I can't even drink regular Coca-Cola without like subconsciously tasting vodka from like teenage drinking.
God,
I hate Coke. I can't drink it.
It's like Dr. Pepper. It's like I always
just associated
like a little vodka. I also I loved Snoop Dogg. He was my jam. And so lots of songs that remind me of just like country roads, driving and boozing. So pop culture.
Oh, I was going to say, I was just thinking about the movie National Lampoon Christmas, and I thought it was like really funny one year to get these moose like shot glasses and have like drinks, and with my kids, every time that they would say a certain word, we had to drink. Like this was my idea of a really fun way to spend Christmas. Was to play a drinking game watching that movie every time. My kids were like, stop, Mom, like we cannot drink anymore. I was like, come on.
It's so funny because I even like all the time will be like, oh, let's make a drinking game about that, and like not even serious about it, but we'll be like doing any sort of like watching anything. I'm like watching The Bachelor. I'm like, oh, let's like make a drinking game out of this. Like, and it's just such the culture of like drinking games. And I'm like, don't even mean it literally. Like, let's take shots. But like, you know, like every time Joe does this on The Bachelor, like we must, like, blah, 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 you know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What a weird.
There's a lot of alcohol on The Bachelorette and the
Oh my
Bachelor
God.
too, right? And that one, what's the other one called? That's like the whole group of them together. I'm not really into it, but
Bachelors in Paradise.
What is it called?
The Bachelors in Paradise. Like they're just drinking all the time, right?
Mm-hmm. I can't even watch it anymore because I just feel so upset by it because I mean, I used to not like it. And then I had some roommates that got me really into it. And then I got into it for a while. And now that I'm sober, I'm just like, this is just very sad how many of these people are like in really vulnerable situations. And there's a really interesting show where someone who left The Bachelor, I think it's called Unreal, she wrote a fictional show about a romance reality TV show where the producers are trying to mess up all the people's lives. And it's like, speculated that it's based on her time at The Bachelor, basically, and it's really interesting to see what they do pretty bad things behind the scene that really impact people to make them unstable, to make them saying and doing things that they're doing, and once you know all that, it's like, you know, I don't know why we watch this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's one that has a big influence on people now.
Oh, absolutely. Well, this has been amazing conversation. I'm actually really happy we had it because it's gotten me like really hyped up and reminded of why I started Sober Girls Yoga in the beginning. And it's funny because I thought it was like the more feminist thing to make it more inclusive to people. But as we have this conversation, I feel like the more feminist thing is to bring back a special space for it. And so I'm really glad that we had this conversation and really able to be reminded about like why I started what I did, and really excited that it's coming back. And I guess we'll carry on this conversation in a Sober Girls Club.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Alex.
Day, everyone. Night, everyone, wherever you are in the world. We'll see you soon.
Oh my gosh.
Take care. Love you, ladies. Mwah.